to you and welcome to Adelante Chicago. I'm Lourdes Duarte. Thank you so much for joining us today. Bienvenidos. Let's get to it. We begin with Puerto Rico, the vote out of that island. This is the fifth status referendum in 50 years. It received a 97% victory in favor of statehood. What does it all mean? And is there a road to statehood for Puerto Rico? Joining us is Ada Lopez. She's an author, educator. She has the book Así Somos, Who We Are. Thank you and welcome for coming.
Well, thank you. I'm delighted to be here.
Okay. Let's get right to it because as I mentioned there, five times this has been voted on.
That's right, a plebiscite.
What is the difference this time around?
Well, the difference is that there has been a boycott of the elections. That's one major difference. And many believe that the boycott has been successful because in a place, you know, Puerto Rico, that has a tradition of 80 to 85% voter turnout, then you have a 23% voter turnout. Of the 23%, then you have an overwhelming majority that voted for statehood. So some believe that those who want statehood came out to vote for statehood, but that the other, you know, the rest, which is the majority, objected to a plebiscite at this juncture.
Okay. One of the things that we were talking about is that this has become so complicated. Every time it comes up, people are trying to make sense of it, how the vote shakes out and why people have this feeling, right? And you said this goes back 500 years. So explain to me the confusion and the discontent.
Well, you know, Lourdes, for those of us who visit Puerto Rico and many of the people who live there, Puerto Rico is a paradise, you know. It's resorts and beaches, beautiful homes, good people, you know, generous, welcoming, hospitable. But Puerto Rico is also a very complex society because we have two histories, you can say. One is our relationship with Spain, and that goes from 1493 to 1898. And then in 1898 to the present, we have a relationship with the U.S. And that explains, you know, why we have a strong identity that is Hispanic. We have a strong, you know, system of belief which is Christian, and it started with Catholic. And we also have we value the Spanish language, and we consider ourselves part of the Hispanic world. On the other hand, from 1898, we have this relationship with the U.S., which explains the economy. That is an extension of our economy. It explains the military, you know, that importance that Puerto Rico has to the U.S., and the migration to the U.S. So there are this duality, you can say.
So people feel confused. They don't know where they belong.
Well, and so our identity is unique in that way because we are both part of the Hispanic world and we value that, and yet we have this relationship, we have an identity that has been forged in a going and coming from U.S. because we've been citizens for 100 years, since 1917.
Let me ask you, kind of moving forward now, Congress would have to take this up, even though the people of Puerto Rico voted in favor of statehood. How likely is it that this will happen, that Puerto Rico will become the 51st state? I guess, what are the issues with that from the U.S. perspective?
Well, I would say that an overwhelming majority of those who voted, which is 23%, voted for statehood. But the question is, what about the ones who boycotted? And the reasons they boycotted is because they felt it was too quick. The people didn't have a chance to really learn what these options are. And so now what happens is that the different, the people from the different views, the ideologies, will go to Congress. Some will be lobbying against and objecting to the plebiscite. And the present governor, of course, you know, he's for statehood, so he will be using the 97% as a public relations.
As a platform.
And a
right?
platform to move it forward. But it'll take many, many years to come to a decision if it does happen. And right now, the United States is undergoing an economic crisis.
But so is Puerto Rico, and that was going to be my next question to you, in terms of timing and in terms of what financially what Puerto Rico is going through, how this would help, and talk about that.
Well, apparently it would translate into more money. If Puerto Rico were a state, it would translate into more money for the island. But if you have a long view, then it is giving up a lot. I mean, the question for people is, what do I give up to get more Medicaid and more, and a better, more help? What do we give up?
So they give up what?
Well, some people believe that they would be losing the language because in the examples that have been used, Hawaii, for example, we see that the native languages were lost, and also the Puerto Rican community that went to Hawaii in the 1900s, we see that they've lost their language. And not their identity. They still identify, many of them, as Puerto Rican, but they've lost their language. And there's only one school in Honolulu that teaches the history.
But hasn't it gotten to a point where Puerto Rico is in such financial distress that this may be sort of their only option?
Well, the different parties, the different political parties have different ideas. I think that most people agree that the colonial relationship with the U.S. is only creating more dependency for Puerto Rico, and it's not something that can be sustained. So I think most people do want to resolve this and change the colonial relationship. How that's done, whether it's statehood, whether it's a version of the Commonwealth with a bit more autonomy, or whether it's some form of independence with dual citizenship and basically the same relationship that we have with the U.S., these are ideas that the College of the Bar Association of Puerto Rico, which is 150 years old, and they're more policy analysts, they believe that this is a process that is so complicated that people should have a democratic process and they should be able to really understand the trade-offs of all these different solutions. And then you have a plebiscite.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Ada Lopez, author, professor. We appreciated. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you, Lourdes.
All right. I know
it's a
that
pleasure.
this is a topic that we can talk about for a while.
Forever.
I'm sure you will be back. Thank you so much.
But I think to say that it's complex and that our history informs us and the history is there is something important.
All right. Thank you so much.